Ashley Walton from the Manager Vault. I'm currently a Chief Marketing Officer and I've served in various VP roles over the years. And today I'm in my home office. I'm standing on my treadmill. I have a treadmill desk and I'm here with my business partner, Sean McGinnis.
Hey, Ashley. Great to see you again. Hi, everyone. For those of you that are new watchers, I'm Sean McGinnis, currently the COO of a direct response company. I've been president and CMO at a number of e-commerce businesses and lead gen businesses and agencies down through the years. Mostly focused on digital in my career. Senior leader and co-founder of the Manager Vault. So we're happy to talk to you today.
Yes, thanks, Sean. And today we have a special treat because we have gotten enough responses from some of our reader polls in our newsletter to start to craft our content around those responses. So we had a question in one of our polls that said, what communication habit do you think leaders underestimate the most? And your response was explaining the why. So today we're going to talk about explaining the why it's important, how much context is enough, when and why to do it. And I want to start by asking Sean, um, when and why do you think leaders should explain context?
Think whenever it's relevant for them to be able to do a better job and kind of give it their all. And it's rare that I don't give context when I'm speaking to my direct reports, especially and team members. One of my favorite sayings is, "I'll tell you everything I can tell you, but I can't tell you everything." Right? There's just some things that we're not as senior leaders allowed to or is improper to share, given timing of situations. There can be very sensitive discussions going on around staffing, other coworkers, potential acquisitions going down. Like there's so many different things that you should never share. But my default mode outside of that is pretty much to share everything. And the most important thing to share is the strategy. I typically serve a visionary or a CEO or a founder. And the picture I always have in my head is the founders at the front of the boat pointing the way. Where are we going? And my job is to steer the ship and to make sure that everyone else in the boat is rowing to the same cadence. And that's the role that I kind of thrive in. And so it's what I'm really good at is acting as that translation layer between a visionary or a CEO and everyone in the business, but especially my team. And so it's important that that gets conveyed down to the lowest possible level as clearly as possible and as consistently as possible. So everyone in the organization is singing from the same hymn book, so to speak, to beat another kind of analogy to death. Like that's just there's so many times when that comes in, it's a necessity. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I love that. I would say, I mean, having been a person that reported to you, that built so much trust. Me feeling like I could trust you and feeling like I was trusted by you and could be treated as an adult with
Yeah.
nuanced information. And I would say some of the best advice I got from a leadership coach that I worked with is she started asking me how often I was actually explaining and breaking down why I was doing everything that I was doing for my team. And before working with that leadership coach, I thought, oh, yeah, I'm doing that. But once I started working with her, I realized, oh no, a lot of times I'm assuming other people already have context, or I'm jumping in a little bit further into the story, and that damages trust. People want to be brought along into your thought process and your decision making and why you've decided to do the things that you're doing. Even if you can't democratize the decision making, you can at least tell people, um, here was my thought process and here's why I did it. And now I've broken it down even further and I share my strategic framework that's literally me writing down for my team. Here's how my brain works, and here's
Right.
how I make decisions. And I apply this framework, and that's how we get to where we are. And you're welcome to ask questions and poke holes and challenge the assumptions, which I try to name. Um, but I'm trying to be very transparent with how I think. And I would say the other thing that that does is it starts to naturally build multipliers, right? So now you're bringing other people up on strategic thinking and how you think, and eventually they'll probably have their own frameworks and their own strategic way of thinking, but it has so many consequences that are positive around team morale and team impact.
I just thought of one of the major things that you shouldn't share when it comes to context, right? Let's talk about the things you should probably never share. And my favorite is that you should never share where there was prior conflict between you and a peer or you and your boss, right? Like that stays behind closed doors. I love Lencioni's analogy that like, behind closed doors, senior leadership should battle like hell for the things they believe in, fight to the death, argue it out, come to a conclusion, and then walk out of that room arm in arm, completely unified that this is the decision we made, and it's my decision as much as it's the CEO's decision or the ownership group's decision, the board's decision, or whoever's decision it was, that the minute you don't honor that agreement, you get political BS just populating throughout the organization. And the fact that you're willing to verbalize to your team that maybe you and your peer leader disagreed about something. Now they think it's okay that there's these two different teams and they're not fully aligned, right? So, but share the context of why the decision was made. The decision was made for a reason, and here's what we believe to be true, and here's why that it serves the strategic direction that the CEO has set in the business, and this is why we're focused on this, right? Um, I just remember being an individual contributor and like in my head saying, I just don't treat me like a kindergartner. All I want to know is like why we're doing this. Why, and knowing why probably would have, satisfied a lot of curiosity in my own head and probably reinforced how smart my bosses were. But without any of that, you're left to just kind of like twist and wonder, like, do these people really know what they're doing? Because there's a lot of things that you might not know about that are influencing their decision, right?
Yeah, that's right. And what you shared reminded me of some other things that I have rules for myself that I don't share. That some of them are even a little bit unpopular, I think, but I do not share things that are told to me in one-on-ones unless I ask permission to share those things. So that goes for people on my team, it goes for meetings with my boss, it goes for my peers. Like I assume that we're being more candid in a safe space, talking to each other.
Sure.
And if I ever want to share something outside of that meeting, I'll ask permission and I'll be very clear about that. And that gets tricky when you're having to, for example, fire someone and you have context for why that person needs to be fired. But I also believe that I don't want to tarnish people's reputations leaving the company. Even when I have to fire someone, it's the worst thing you have to do as a leader. You still care about that person. You still want what's best for them. You still want things to work out for them elsewhere. And I don't ever want anybody on my team to worry, oh, well, if I quit, is she's gonna say things about me behind my back? Or, if I'm let go, is everybody at the company gonna know why? Like, no. We have to honor some boundaries and treat people with respect. What about like how do we know how much context is enough? Do you think about that according to who you're talking to, or does it depend on the situation?
I mean, I think it always does, and there you need to have boundaries that get drawn along the way. But again, my default mode is just kind of oversharing. You know that. I mean, you having dealt with me as your boss for 3 years or 2.5 years, whatever it was, before you moved on to another part of the organization. It's it's enough to keep focused on the employee's development. To your point about stretching their thinking and getting them more strategic mindset. Um, and it kind of touches on a piece of feedback too around the level that you're at in the organization, you have to be kind of more strategic as you grow, right? And so you need to have a bigger field of view, and so if I'm feeding that, then that's going to, bias me toward that default mode where I want to make sure that that person has at least enough that is going to stretch their thinking and have them really understand the context. Because especially for like a first level manager, it's really tempting to focus on just your team, right? When you think about like this is my most important role and my kind of sacred duty is to protect them. And the minute you want to move your career beyond that, you cannot think like that. On a number of occasions, I gave people feedback that were moving from a manager to director level. You have to not just be a great team leader, you have to be thinking about the whole business. And that's a hard shift to make. It's probably, I think I remember giving you that feedback. It is the hardest step to take in a career is going from, in my opinion, going from I've got my team and it's just my team and it's pretty small to thinking more broadly about the strategic reasons the business is doing certain things, a completely change in direction, on where we're going or the type of content we want to create or going from organic to paid or like there's so many different examples or entering a new category from a product perspective. There's just it applies in almost every sense.
Yes, I totally remember you giving me that feedback. And at the time, when I was a manager, I was so close with my team. And it's a lot harder to set boundaries when you're the frontline manager. And probably I shared way, not probably, I shared too much context with my team at that point. I democratized too many things. I drew out too many decisions because I was trying to get complete consensus, which, gosh, I just made things hard for myself. And in hindsight, I would not operate that way. And I remember you telling me, hey, you need to have stronger relationships with your fellow directors and when I was a VP with your fellow VPs, than you do with your team and your direct reports. And that was so hard for me to even wrap my mind around as a possibility because I've always been really close with my direct reports. And I'm still friends with people who have been direct reports of mine, just as I'm still friends with you. And that is a hard lesson to learn. And it was something I really needed to hear, even though it was hard. It was a hard shift.
From kind of first level management to the next level where you're overseeing a group of managers. When you're in that first level, you're coaching people on how to do the job that you just did. And it kind of comes back to our core philosophy that management is a skill and you have to learn it. And a lot of times you can wind up getting promoted to the next level without really appreciating that and fully enveloping it. And so now you're no longer teaching people how to be a great, in your case, copywriter. Uh, Now you got to teach people how to be a great manager. And it's a totally different game. And plus the added scope of like really thinking about the whole business or another aspect of the business. And I really do think that was the right coaching to give you at the time, which was build those alliances with your peers because you all have to come off as a unified front with everyone else kind of, standing behind you.
Knowing that this discussion topic came out of a poll and people feeling like maybe they're not sharing enough context or they're not explaining the why enough, um, maybe what are a few actionable tips you would tell our readers and followers of simple things that they could implement?
I think the main one is to just ask yourself whenever you're communicating either a decision or trying to get people aligned, just ask yourself, what do they really need to know in order to move forward? And um, if you really are honest with yourself and answer that question, it's going to be more than you think. And I think that's the main thing is most people get in this mode where they're just communicating down what they need to communicate. People want to be, this is a phrase that one of my old bosses gave to me along the way. He said, look, everybody wants to be an important part of something important. And you get them to understand that and feel that way by telling them how important their role is and where it plugs into everything else, right? And so having that context is just such an important step. And so it's really to me asking yourself, what do they need to know? What can I and can't I share before you're communicating on almost every level?
Sean, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for answering my questions and being my mentor. And thank you to all of you for submitting your poll results. We do read them all and we do try to incorporate it. So please keep responding to polls.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out. And if you hit reply to any one of those emails, it comes right to Ashley in my inbox, and we would love to get feedback on anything at all. Anything that you got from the newsletter, we'd love to some feedback, but we'd also love to field any questions that you have and answer them here on the podcast.
Thank you. Bye,
It's great to see
everyone.
you. Bye.